What kind of company is Xiaomi? How and when did it become this big? Why is it that this company came out of nowhere, became successful at a time when everyone was failing? And this is not your typical story. Everyone started small, some at a garage, some at a small office, and slowly but surely they have grown to the giants that they are today. But not Xiaomi. It feels like Xiaomi just happened. It's just there. Now everyone has accepted it as one of the biggest and most successful companies of all time. But how did it all happen? What is different about Xiaomi? Where is it headed? And most importantly, should you trust it? Well, we will get into all of that. But what better place to start than the beginning? So it was founded in 2010, and to everyone's surprise, it didn't launch with a phone. It actually wasn't a company that made any physical products. It made HyperOS, which is an operating system that their phones use to this day, which is just a reskin of Android. It's not like they made an operating system from scratch, but they made some changes and they were successful. People were using their reskin of Android so much that just after 1 year of them doing this, they were confident enough to launch their first phone, the Xiaomi Mi 1. And from that day onward, they never stopped. They just kept making phone after phone, product after product, with each one being more successful than the last. Most of them at least. More on that later in the video. The interesting thing about Xiaomi is that they always listened to their community. They tried whatever the community said. When people wanted that 108 megapixel camera, they brought that to their budget phones. People wanted more RAM, they did that. Whatever the people wanted, they tried that, and they always had extremely competitive prices. Now they never were the best all-around phone, but when something is 5 times cheaper than the competition, you don't have to be the best. And I think that's why people bought them, because they might not have been up to the standards of the flagship phone from Samsung before, but if you take Samsung and Xiaomi's mid and low-end phones, you have a totally different story, because you get a lot more phone with a lot less money. But there's also the other question, why is it so cheap? How come that there are companies that have created phones for decades and still couldn't be successful? They couldn't make their phones cheaper, even though they had factories, they had experience, they had the workforce, they had everything. And Xiaomi, who has nothing, no factories, no nothing, and even joined the smartphone market late compared to the others, but still seems to be unbeatable. Why is that? The answer is way simpler than you might think. They are listening to the consumer. They are cutting corners in all of the right places. When they launched and they were selling smartphones, they only were selling smartphones online, so they didn't have to maintain the stores because that's just an extra cost of them. They didn't do mainstream media commercials because that's an extra cost that the consumer doesn't want. I mean, you probably like to hear some singers, but if you were on a budget and wanted a good phone, you probably wouldn't want them to be the reason you can't buy a decent phone, because the commercials, let's just say that they can be expensive and someone will have to pay for them, but that someone isn't Xiaomi. They just adjust really quickly. And there are some other reasons why Xiaomi is so cheap, but more on that a bit later in the video. And you might be aware that there are some stores from Xiaomi all over the world now, but the only reason for that is because people asked for those stores in those places, because they wanted to see the product. You know, different countries, different cultures, and they delivered. That's the reason. They just adjusted quickly. Some might say too quickly. Some people say they plan to make phones long ago. That's why their phones are sophisticated. Some people think that they might be hiding something that no one knows, because they design so many phones, but they have such a little workforce compared to other companies that are their competitors. And then there are others that say that they are copying other people. Now, what you believe is up to you, but the latter makes a bit more sense. Now, is that good or bad? Well, as a consumer, I don't know, because it's good. They don't spend money on their design, they don't have to hire as many engineers because they don't have to, and their phones are a lot cheaper in return. Again, we don't know if they are copying other brands, but it is likely. I mean, just think, what is the country that has the most strict laws when it comes to patents? You know, the thing that you do so other companies can't copy you? Well, the strictest country when it comes to patents is America. And guess which country Xiaomi just randomly decided not to sell products to? Yes, it's America. A coincidence? I think not. So why is that? People think that it is infringing on other companies' patents, and if it started operating in America, then that would make Xiaomi liable to lawsuits. But if it's not operating there and the lawsuits in other countries are more lenient, then, well, you get the idea. It just doesn't matter as much. They can get away with it, but how much of that is true? Well, that's for you to decide, because other countries have strict laws as well, but you will see Xiaomi selling products in those places without a problem. But it is suspicious considering how big of a market the US is. And one thing that we need to give Xiaomi credit about is that they are good at copying. I mean, they do it right. Gotta give credit where credit is due, and I think that's why people love them. And they are adjusting their sales tactics, because let's be honest, what is the place that people buy the most things nowadays? It is the internet. Now, when it comes to the internet, well, let's just say that when you compare the info in Xiaomi phones and the other brands, in comparison, it feels like you are getting a lot more with Xiaomi compared to the other brands, because their numbers are higher, which makes people think that that is better. And most of the time that would be correct. Higher supplier is better, so they are taking advantage of everything they can. But even if we take a step back and look at the stores, which company has the best stores in the world when it comes to selling electronics? So I might say Apple. And Xiaomi, for better or for worse, seems to want to make you feel like you went in an Apple store, and it makes you feel like you are buying a premium product, just like Apple, for a fraction of the price. And the products that they sell for a fraction of the price are, dare I say, premium compared to the competition? Always. I mean, it has extremely fast charging, and it brings that to the cheaper phone. It has high-res cameras, and it brings that to its budget phones as well. Okay, now the things like the processor and the processing that happens to the picture is not as good as other companies, so those numbers don't tell the whole story. I know that, but they tell enough. They bring premium feature to budget phones, and there's no getting around that. Other companies just don't do that to the same degree. Xiaomi just makes you feel special with a $300 to $400 phone, something that other companies just aren't able to provide. Now, we talked about how Xiaomi is copying other companies, but let's talk a bit about its innovations over the years. It's not like Xiaomi doesn't innovate. Actually, compared to how new the company is, the company has innovated quite a bit. Some things have flopped for obvious reasons, but Xiaomi has done and is doing a lot of innovating in the background. It is said that they will start launching their own chipsets, and that right there is something to be excited for, because with its own chipsets and its own parts, it can optimize the phone a lot more compared to it buying chipsets from other companies. Now, it still doesn't use its own operating system, and by what I have seen, it doesn't plan to do that. But you never know, it might be forced to do that in the future. Jokes aside, I truly believe that the company trying to make everything on its own is good for a couple of reasons. First, Xiaomi doesn't make a lot of profit for each unit sold. It has a razor thin margin. So if it keeps that strategy and it makes everything on its own, it only makes sense that things will get to be cheaper because there's no middleman. And one thing, and this is good for people who don't even buy Xiaomi products, for every product that Xiaomi makes and sells, and for every innovation that it has made and will make in the future, the competition will be more fierce, which means that other companies are not just going to stand by and do nothing. They will have to compete or they will go bankrupt. So that means that they will have to innovate, which means better products over the years for us. And they are not just going to innovate. The more popular Xiaomi becomes, the more other companies are going to lower their prices, because if a Xiaomi phone is that much noticeably better for a cheaper price, then why should the consumer buy from other brands? I mean, there are people who are loyal to a certain brand, but that is the minority, hopefully. I mean, how much longer is Samsung's name going to carry its sales? They have earned that right. Samsung always makes quality products. I'm not saying that Samsung is bad. I'm just saying that there's a reason why Samsung has released the A series phones and why those phones are so cheap compared to Samsung flagships. But even Samsung is putting so much work and effort competing with Xiaomi in the mid-range department to the degree where people don't even feel like getting a flagship phone is a worthy upgrade compared to the mid-range phones. And the flagship has to be quite a bit better for people to justify the price tag. What I am trying to say is that Xiaomi has put Samsung in a lose-lose situation. If Samsung makes its A series phones cheaper and a bit better, no one is going to buy its flagships. But if it doesn't make them better, no one is going to buy the mid-range phones because they will all go to Xiaomi. Curious to see what Samsung will do. Only the future will tell, I guess. We have talked highly about Xiaomi. I mean, we talked about it copying other brands, but nothing that would be to the user detriment. So let's talk about the shady part of Xiaomi. First things first. Yes, it does copy. We don't know for sure, but if you produce hundreds of products and you still only have 30,000 workers, then those workers are copying someone because they just can't output that many original ideas. I mean, Samsung has like 9 times the workers Xiaomi has. Or let's compare Apple, which only makes like 4 phones a year, and those phones are almost identical to each other and almost identical to the phones they made last year and the year before that and the year before that and so on. You get the idea. Apple has like 5 times the number of workers Xiaomi has, and they can't come up with that many products. So Xiaomi is copying other brands, but like I said, even at this point in time, that doesn't affect us negatively. It just affects other brands. The other thing is safety and privacy. Let's just say that companies from China tend to not be as safe as other companies if we look at what the media says. But is Xiaomi different? Well, I don't know. Up to this point, it has not done anything to suggest that it is not safe. But it has cut some corners that just make you start thinking about where their priorities are. One thing that I don't like about Xiaomi is that it might be the only phone that shows you ads from apps that come with the phone, so it can make money from those ads. For example, if you download a program from the Play Store, it will show you an ad after the download. Now, I am not saying that that is good nor bad. They had to cut some corners, and if you ask most people, the majority of people that are on a budget would not mind a couple of ads if it means that their phone is a lot more powerful. And I'm one of those people, but then again, it makes the experience of using the phone a bit worse, a bit more annoying. It is something that it does and other companies don't. You will not have the same problem if you buy a Samsung phone. Even if you buy a budget phone, it will not cut that corner. Once you buy a Samsung phone, the company does not profit from you. Not like Xiaomi does, at least. And they do this for a lot of reasons. Like I said, Xiaomi phones are designed to be sold online. Now, because of that, they will have less stores. $100. They sell products like that so they can keep the cost low. They make thin margins so they can sell more phones, and they play ads on the phones they sell so they can make those phones even cheaper. It does that and some other things as well to keep the price low. When it comes to you purchasing the item online, it feels like if you are on a budget and you don't buy a Xiaomi phone, you are losing. You are not getting the best thing you can get. When you open the Xiaomi website, you will see that they use every little trick on the book. They focus on the things that they do the best, or at least things that take a lot of attention. Let's compare. For example, the Xiaomi Note 13 Pro 5G. I mean, just from the name you will know that the phone is 5G compatible. The other thing you will see is the storage, which you can get a lot of for not much more money, and you also have a lot of RAM. The other thing is that they emphasize on the 200 megapixel camera, which if you look at it, you might think that this phone takes good photos, like the latest Samsung phone, because that too has a 200 megapixel camera. And one more thing, it has really fast charging, even compared to the flagships from Apple and Samsung. It is good, and when I say it is good, I mean it is better than them. This mid-tier phone charges a lot faster than the flagship from Apple and Samsung, and the screen is 120Hz AMOLED, which is perfection. Like even the latest iPhone 16 has a 60Hz display, which means that this phone will feel and be smoother than the latest iPhone 16. But is that the case? On paper, yes. In reality, yes and no. There are a lot of good things about the phones, don't get me wrong. They feel like premium phones even when you use it, but if you compare it to a real flagship, it feels like it is missing a lot of things. Don't take it from me, just go and ask other people who have seen all of these phones, or people who have used these phones. They will tell you a different story than what's on paper. First, the screen on Samsung phones are a lot better in reality compared to Xiaomi's phones, which is surprising because even Xiaomi uses AMOLED displays. The other thing is the camera. It is 200 megapixel, but it never actually performs as good as the Samsung phones. Not even close to it, because the sensor isn't as high of a quality, and the phone itself can't actually process the photo as good and as quickly as Samsung. Because one thing that people tend to forget about when looking at a phone is the chipset, and the Samsung flagship has the best chipset money can buy for that year, and the chip can process the photo and is more efficient doing it, and it is more powerful overall. For example, if you want to play games, it can do that a lot better than Xiaomi's phone. The point where I'm trying to get is that the numbers don't tell the whole story. I know that, and you should too, but still, can you really compare a $400 phone to $1,000 phone? I mean, you can, I just did, but in practice, if the difference is not big, and if people don't need those functionalities that the flagship provides, then people will just go for the cheaper variant. Xiaomi just knows when to innovate and when not to. They are not going to innovate in the mid and low end phones because they don't need to, but when it comes to high end phones, well, it has innovated. I don't know if it's for the better or for the worse, but it has done that. It has mostly failed because the ideas it has tried were good on paper, but in reality, not as good. It just doesn't make sense. The other thing that Xiaomi is innovating is the ecosystem. They don't do it like Apple. They have this ecosystem inside the house. They make pretty much almost everything you would need for a house, and they have really got software that works for these devices. Samsung has done things similar to that, but Xiaomi does it in a way more price competitive way, like always. And this is one more reason they are okay with making a razor thin margins on products, because they don't sell one product to you. They sell a lot of products to you. If you buy a cheap phone from Xiaomi and you are happy with it, you will trust Xiaomi. And when you see another cheap product from Xiaomi, you will be tempted to buy that too. Let's say, for example, you see a vacuum cleaner, you will get that too. And if it works, the next time you see a watch from Xiaomi, well, you will be tempted to buy that too. And then owning a tablet doesn't seem as bad. So you go back and forth, and you might end up spending as much money as you would spend buying the iPhone 16 Pro Max on buying products from Xiaomi. To Xiaomi's credit, you would buy furnitures for your whole house with that budget in the Xiaomi store, but you would still spend quite a bit on that. So yeah, you are getting a lot more products. One other thing that I have heard people talk about is longevity. They say that people who buy an iPhone use that phone for many more years than people who buy an Android phone, and that is just not true, at least not to the same degree. They might use that phone for a year longer, but most people tend to use the Android phones that they buy for almost as long as people who buy iPhones. Remember, these Xiaomi phones are cheap, but they are also high quality phones. They don't break down that fast. You can make the argument that a user that has an iPhone after use sells the iPhone, and that iPhone goes back to the market to be used again, which is not the case with these Xiaomi budget phones, but that is a completely other story. And the only reason for that is that the iPhone, even after 3 years of use, somewhat retains its value compared to Xiaomi phones. That's the one good thing about it, but you won't sell it for the price you bought, not even near that. And with that out of the way, we talked about a couple of reasons why Xiaomi is succeeding. We talked about some good things about Xiaomi, we talked about some bad things about Xiaomi, but where is it headed? Is the company going to start to make more expensive phone? Is it going to make more money per unit sold like Samsung? Is it going to cross the line and sell our data? Because it does doesn't have a problem showing us ads even after we buy their products? Is it going to innovate? Is it going to continue copying other brands? And in my opinion, good things are coming for Xiaomi as a company and for its users. And there are a couple of reasons for that. First, it is bringing more expensive phones to the market, and in those phones it has higher margins per unit sold. But it doesn't seem to affect the priorities of the mid and low end phones, which is the products we are most interested in. And the other thing worth mentioning is that it was a new company and now it is becoming more and more mature as a company. It is coming up with more and more original ideas and original products, so their head is at the right place. The other thing, and I think this is an important one, is the chipset. It is said that they might start making their own chipset. A lot of companies have tried doing that, most have failed, or at least did not do a good job at it, so they are not as big. Qualcomm having another competitor won't harm us. The more competition, the better, and who knows, maybe they will start making their own original operating system from the ground up, because when it comes to the actual operating system, there's not much choice. You either go with Android or iOS, and with how big Xiaomi is right now and how many units it's selling, it could be worth developing the operating system just for its own devices. Anyway, do you think Xiaomi is actually going to end up doing it? Is it going to innovate, or is it going to copy other companies? Is it going to keep growing, or is it going to raise its prices and just become like every other company? By the way, don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. Bye bye.